Conversation's always good, Jim.
Right.
I'm here to stop you from talking.
Oh,
I didn't say which way the surprise was.
Uh-huh. All right, call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mrs. Thompson. Here. Mr. Morris. Mr. Bittner.
Here.
Mr. Shaboo.
Here.
Mr. Linder. London.
Here.
Wonder. Mr. Johnson.
Here. Approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from the regular meeting of council February 14th, 2023?
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Ms. Thompson. Aye. Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Abstain. Correspondence. Clerk, is there any correspondence this evening?
I do not have any.
Does any member of council have correspondence this evening? Hearing none, we will move on to administrative and department head reports. Mayor and Safety Director, Mr. Eva, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson, members of council, the public here this evening. I went to the community cat meeting in Wickliffe. Just want to give you a little update on that. I don't see any change to our legislation. I think it's mostly the legislation that we passed, never passed, is now passed in Wickliffe. And they were trying to educate the residents of Wickliffe then on how all that works. Some of the highlights I would say, TNR, as you all know, is the trap meter return. What they're looking for is these colonies should promote this activity. They went into a whole multiplying of cats that somehow can churn out 370,000 cats at a time. And so the idea of these feral cat colonies are to trap, meter, and return. All colonies should be registered with the Lake County Community Cat Organization. Now, whether or not they are, if they're not, then if we find here in our community, then I want to know about it and I can get a hold of this organization. They can register, they can get into all the details about what you need to do. All colonies should have a roster of cats too, which is, here's the number and how I can identify. So there's a certain population, and it could be 1, it could be 20, but every colony should know I have 20 cats, if that's what it is. Big part here, which we hear all the time, neighbors should be made aware of the colonies. So if I have a registered colony, I should let my neighbors know, because as we heard, these cats end up in the neighbor's garden, so on and so forth. What these colony or the people that have the colony should do is accommodate their colony cats with everything in their yard so that the cats stay in one place. Now, whether or not that's going to happen because they're feral may not happen. Another thing that we've seen, food and water should be put out at the same time every day for a limited period of time. Couple incidents we've had, food and water's been out all day, all night. The cats are feeding skunks, raccoons, so on and so forth. So that's another thing. Shelters should be in the backyard. This is what they're promoting. The cats may wander front and back, but the shelter should be in the backyard. For us, at least, what I took away is going forward, when we have incidents, if residents come in, I will get a hold of this group. And then if there's any complaints, I'll go to them and say, look, here's what we know, you know, it's on whatever street. Please contact them and, you know, we can meet with them because I'd really rather not get the police department involved, but I will give them another chance to, you know, get with these people, get registered, so on and so forth, and take care of that. That's what I. That concludes my report.
Good. Thank you. Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening, nice to have you back,
Thank you.
but I have no report.
Thank you. Questions for the administration and department heads?
I am. If this person who has a cat colony and if they're registered, but they don't know the number of cats, what can we do about it?
If there's any deviation, let me know, and I will get a hold of this Cindy Valeria, who runs this, and I will say, look, here's where this is. Please get a hold of the resident and explain exactly what you're requiring. You know, you registered the colony. Do you have a number? And then if they can't resolve what's going on, then, you know, we as a city will get involved with that.
Yeah, because I know specifically the next door neighbor, the cats are all over his car in the backyard, the neighbor on the backside.
Right, and
They're all in the yard, but you know what they're doing to their car.
well, that's the whole thing. What I would ask you to do then, give me an address. I will get a hold of this.
I think this person's been reported before.
Well, and if it continues, and that was one of my questions when I was there, that, you know, we had to go out and cite somebody, she had to go to court, and she stopped me right there. She said, I know exactly who you're talking about. We were out there. We reconfigured her whole shelter situation, explained to her the food and water situation. And she said, we feel like we have that under control. So that's what we need to do with this situation too then.
Yeah, because she was leaving the garage door open
Right, and that,
24 hours a day.
Right.
You know, all animals in the world.
sure, and that shouldn't happen. Right.
Needless to say, I've had a lot of complaints.
No, and I know we all have, and this is why. At one time, I know they were kind of inundated with questions, concerns all over Lake County. And it sounds like now they have about 20 people in the organization, all committed to, you know, making sure that these cats are taken care of and they're handled in each city the right way.
Mr. Bittner.
So you did say you feel that our current cat ordinance will be up to date as of right now?
Yes.
There's no, okay.
Yeah, because originally I thought the intent was to change the legislation when they wanted to come here, but it's really the legislation that we have, Mentor has, like I said, and then it was just introduced in Wickliff.
Okay.
And I think we're good there.
Yes.
Did they talk about grants or anything like that? Because when they were here talking to us, they were working on getting grants to have the neutering and everything. I was just wondering how that's going.
I don't think so. I think they work with, it's called Pet Plus or something like that, but it sounded like they're there almost every day with more cats, and I forget, it's either $25 or $35 a cat now or something, but the idea is to not just continue, but to try, you know, trap, neuter, return, and get them back, you know, back to the state where they're not reproducing. But they didn't mention anything about grants.
Yeah, they make a lot of donations for the community. And, you know, they try to adopt out cats that are adoptable. So if there are kittens at a colony before they've gotten to it, then they try to adopt those kittens out. Any other questions? Okay, board committee commission reports, zoning committee.
Yes, the zoning committee met February 20th. Started at 6:40. In attendance with myself, Mr. Lunder, Mrs. Thompson, and Mrs. Moore. The committee agreed that the RCARP area should include only parcel 19A091G0000140, address 7784 Salida, Andrews Place. Park. This is currently ordinance number 2022-025. When we get to it, we need to discuss if we want to amend it for just that. Okay. Next, we went over 4 properties. The first one was zoned incorrectly. The one at 7870 Plains Road. And there's 2 lots there. The auditor has commercial apartments and we're looking for garden type apartments district. The next one is 7906 Plains. Needs to be corrected from single family to condominium district. The corner property on Andrews and Munson should be coded on our map as B1. And the last one is 7749 Lakeshore Boulevard should be corrected to B2 and the county with the county in our map. Apparently, we have to send out letters first to each one of these counties, each one of the owners, letting them know, and we'll go from that. Okay.
Okay.
See you.
Board of Zoning Appeals.
Board of Zoning Appeals met on February 20th. Meeting started at 7 p.m. was ended by 7:47. General appeal for ordinance 1466-02, sections 1, 3, and 5. For property at 7483 Salida Road from previous meeting on January 16th of 2023. The attendance with Ray Geeling, Jim Lunder, Michelle Moore, Mayor Eagle, Mike Sweeney, Brandon Towns, Kathy Roos, and Winto from 7346 Salida. The report from Corey Flowers stated that Mr. Timmons corrected all the previous violations except the removal of 1 tree. After the board looked at pictures of the tree in question, they all agreed that Mr. Timmons must have the tree, trunk, or branch be removed by April 6th. And on April 7th, Mr. Flowers, the inspector for the city of Mineral Lake, will visit the property at 7483 Salida to ensure that said tree, trunk, branch has been removed. If the work is not completed by April 6th, the city will handle the violation.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee, Committee of the Whole.
Yes, so the finance committee was voted to be held as council of the whole to review the appropriations budget for the 2023-2024 year. We went through the budget section by section, which breaks it down to the various departments. There in the budget, there is to hire 2 full-time firefighters. There will be some changes with the police department due to the retirement of the police chief that are accounted for. Also looked at attaining a new police car. There were no major changes. There is a projected positive carryover for the next year. And the recommendation was made to accept the appropriations for the year and submit it to council for resolution and votes.
Utility Committee.
The Utility Committee met on February 23rd, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Ended at 6:37 p.m. to go over ordinance 1044-0.06.g related to facility charging from Aqua, Ohio. Also to go over Republic Service contract. In attendance was myself, Dave Shaboo, Kevin Bittner, and Michelle Moore. I received the prices from Aqua Ohio to update the ordinance. We went over the new prices and all agreed the increase. Everybody agreed on the increase, and I will send them to Mr. Lyons for him to change the ordinance, which I did, and he hasn't received it. We also discussed the upcoming contract with Republic Services. We all agreed that the administration should investigate other refuge companies starting in September to see what they have to offer. Republic's contract is up in May of 2024. We also request that the committee be involved with the administration when they review them.
Yeah, thank you. Ordinance committee.
Ordinance committee met on February 23rd as well. We started at 7, turned at 8. We discussed the proposed right-of-way ordinance and inspection fees once again. Present with myself, Mr. Taboo, Ms. Moore, Mr. Lunder, and a few members of the public. We went over the new proposal for the new ordinance for the right-of-way. There's a few questions on that, which we will be directing to the law director. Then we went over the rental inspection fees, what was proposed by the last ordinance committee. The legislation to be drawn up by the law director in order to review that.
Thank you. Any other boards or commissions, committees meet? Hearing none, we will move on to open to the public to speak. This is your opportunity to come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record, and speak to council.
Mr. Great, 7574 Dahlia Drive. Quick question as it relates to, I know it's not a Q&A, but your numbers don't match what you present to the public and your appropriations spreadsheet. You have expressed that you have 2.6 million with regards to current appropriations. If you were to add that up at face value, you're sitting at 2.9. Second to that, page 4, whenever relates to the charter amendment policies. I understand they can fluctuate, but the misnomer here is how can one be abstained from an increase if they're all subjugated to property valuations? If 2 out of the 3 are going up, the third one should have a current valuation of upward 2, since they're all voted on a procedural policy which are set in stone valuations. Because those don't add up either based on last year's appropriations. It's a huge increase of 76,000 for the police, 17,000 for the fire, and roads at 0. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we will close this portion of the meeting. We'll move on to legislation for council. Resolution number 2023-R-04. If you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2023-R-04, a resolution confirming the appointment of Kyle Kozlowski to the Parks and Recreation Board.
Any questions on this? I have one. Did you get a application form for us?
Volunteer form, yes.
Yeah. Oh, did it come up? I must have missed it. Got it. Okay, thanks.
There.
All right. Any motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Bittner, second by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Ms. Moore. Aye. Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, second by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Ms. Moore.
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-25. If you please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-25, third reading, assigned to zoning committee. An ordinance amending appendix A to the codified ordinances, RTARP area, and declaring an emergency.
Discussion. What did you want to do with this now?
We wanted it to limit it to a certain parcel. And Mr. Lyons will give us the exact wording as to how he wants it done. Now, we can always change it for a different parcel if we wish, but it seems to me that at the moment, we just limit it to that parcel, then we can control if somebody else future. Like if somebody wants to put it over there on Lake Shore, we could discuss it.
President, can I jump in? So I got Mr. Shaboo's email about that. And I checked to see what the ordinance was for council. And I believe that I originally drew it up so it was broader. And then I think in an agenda meeting, it was pretty strongly indicated it should be a lot less in terms of the crosshatching of the map. And then at the last agenda meeting, Joyce and Kevin, we took a look at what was currently before council. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joyce, but the only thing that's before council right now is that one parcel. And while it's not identified by the permanent parcel number, instead it's identified, by the crosshatching. Plus it's identified by 200 feet from Salida south on the Andrew.
Correct.
So I think that's already in front of council. I think.
That was where I left it. I know that.
Right.
So you tell me it doesn't need to be.
It has already been amended to do that. That was the proposed version. We can hold off on voting on this so we all have a copy of that to make sure we're all in agreement. So I
We're
will,
gonna need a,
Public hearing. I don't
Right.
believe we've had a.
but we want to make sure we have the right draft before we have a public
And
hearing.
I think Joyce checked it, and then she checked it twice,
Mhm.
and it still looked right.
And it's still gotta go to planning and zoning anyway, correct?
It does, planning and zoning, per the charter, not per the charter, but per our ordinance, has to consider it and vote on it before it can be passed by council. They don't have to approve it.
Right.
They have to consider it.
But they have to consider it before we can vote on it.
Correct.
so we can move it to that.
So we will submit it to planning and zoning, who isn't meeting next month, so they won't meet until the following month, so.
But in the meantime, you can still set it for a public hearing.
Yes,
If you want to do. it.
yes. Okay, so we will submit that to planning and zoning and we will schedule a public hearing at the appropriate time, this meeting. Ordinance number 2022-0-27. If you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-27, third reading. An ordinance amending codified ordinances 1240.02, 1258.02, and creating new section 1258.021 in order to regulate small box discount stores in the city.
This has a public hearing scheduled for Tuesday, March 28th, 7 p.m. So that will stay on the agenda. Ordinance number 2023-0-02, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2023-0-02, an ordinance providing appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Mentor on the Lake for the year 2023, repealing any ordinance prior thereto and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion? Hearing none, this will go on to second reading. Ordinance number 2023-0-03, if you please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2023-0-03, an ordinance providing for the compensation of elected and appointed salaried and hourly employees of the city of Mentor on the Lake, repealing any and all other ordinances and parts thereof which may be inconsistent herewith or which may be redundant hereto, and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion on this? Anything at all? Hearing none, this will go on to second reading. Ordinance number 2023-0-04, if you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2023-0-04, an ordinance extending the existing 2-month moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for zoning and or occupancy permit approvals for small box discount stores and the issuance of such approvals in the city of Mentor on the Lake for a period of 2 months and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion on this? Is there a motion to suspend the rules on
Motion to
this?
suspend.
Second.
Made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Ms. Moore,
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner for passage. Roll call, please.
Ms. Moore,
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Old business, is there any old business tonight? New business, do we have any new business tonight? Okay, open to the public to speak. Yeah, this is your opportunity to come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record and speak to council. Hearing none, we will close this portion open to the public. Announcements and settings of meetings. First, we have planning and zoning is not going to be happening on March sixth. Is that correct, Mr.? Mayor
That's
Giba?
correct, yes.
Okay.
April third.
Hmm?
They have it set here for April third.
Yeah. Public hearing on ordinance number 2022-0-27 is scheduled for Tuesday, March 28th at 7 p.m. Regular agenda meeting will be Thursday, March 9th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Regular meeting of council will be held on Tuesday, March 14th at 7 p.m. Other meetings,
Ordinance.
ordinance committee,
So we'd like to do the 13th. Does somebody have the calendar for the? Paul will be able to make it instead.
The city
the
calendar.
13th.
What's that?
The city calendar.
Yeah. Do you have it?
What date did you want?
March 13th, the Monday.
At what time?
7 is preferred. Second.
Okay.
So. Thank you. We'll continue with right away. Hopefully we'll have the rental inspection stuff and then. Maybe even get to start the trees and business.
Did you say March 13th?
Yes,
The room is reserved.
it is reserved. Yes. Back to the drawing board.
It's open March 6th. And
Can't do
it's,
it earlier. Paul, yeah.
and it's
He's back.
reserved.
The 13th is as earliest.
The ordinance committee has it blocked off on the 20th.
We have it on the 20th.
I think.
It's
we
the
were
standing
given
meeting
the
from last
standing
year.
meeting From last year.
Let's
Monday
keep
the
it to
20th.
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 We're moving it to the 20th?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's back and he'd like to
What time?
7.
7.
Got it.
Any other meetings?
Will the Park and Recreation Board still be meeting
End of March.
at the end of March?
Okay. Hearing no more meetings.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner for adjournment. Roll call, please.
Ms. Moore,
Aye.
Ms. Thompson.
Aye.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
Oh, so he hasn't been on last time.